I'm going to let one more person into the waiting room. All right, so just checking. Looks like we're recording. And then, John, I'm going to make you the host. There's so many people. I got to scroll here. We got 20. We're up to 26. That's nice.
I see the recording icon.
Yeah. No, I just find you. It's actually jumping around. Hold on. I'll get it. There you go. All right. You are the host. Use your powers for good.
Okay. So we're ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm just checking. There's a little red dot. It says recording. All right. So we are recording. This is an official announcement that we're recording. And you're up.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to share my screen and then I will. So my company is Pueblo Computer Systems. I've been at this probably 25 years now. I think I incorporated in 96 and joined the FSA in 96, which is how this whole thing started. Oh, Tony, where is the...
Oh, 11. I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you. All right. I was wrong. Apparently, I've got the waiting room, so you can.
Okay, good.
You can focus on what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, I've been building systems for all sorts of industries over the years, and enjoying the increase of features as time goes on, and which is what I'll be talking about today. The first thing I was going to show is a function that I needed to do for a client that, that's the file. If you ever have I was doing a system for a client that wanted to upload their payroll to ADP, and they had a very complex, shifts and pay rates and union codes, etc., which made it very interesting to build this. But the people at ADP, the developers there, were great. It was really relatively easy to do, considering how complex it was. But one of the things that was required is the file name that's uploaded always has the same starting their identifier for their posting. And then it would be followed by letter codes, as I'm showing you on the screen, AA, AB, AC. So, you know, I think I've done that before, where you kind of look at the alphabet and use choose and all these different things. But then I said to myself, what about the ASCII table? Actually, I thought I would put one up, but I think everyone's seen an ASCII table in this on this call, and they're all numbered. So I decided that I would use the code function to increment the numbers. Rather than worrying about what the letter is, just do this. So, so I'm taking and putting the letter codes into variables, what's left and what's right, and then just evaluating. If I get to Z, let's go back to the beginning. If yeah, right. If the right letter is Z, we're going to increment the left letter 1. Otherwise, we're just incrementing the right letter. So it's very simple. It just I've reset to A. I just click A, B, B. It's super fast, and it doesn't require. You don't really care what you put in there. So very simple thing, but I found that interesting, so I thought others might as well. And that's the simple code for it. I like to use the ellipse when I do variables in let statements. I just find it's easier to identify them visually as I put them into the actual calculations that I'm running. So, you know, this is very weird. It was very, not looking at everybody. It's like, I feel like I'm in the room by myself, but I assume everyone's there. So
well, if you want me to say something, where were you about 6 months ago when I had to do this exact same thing.
I know. You learn things and then you think back to things you could have done with it. Sometimes I go back and retrofit things, but most times not, because no one's paying for that. But sometimes if it's really better, I'll go back and retrofit something. But yeah. So the bulk of the presentation that I wanted to do was based on JSON and the while function. And now I will preface this by saying I'm no expert at JSON and the while function, but I'm using it, and I'm using it, I think, to great, to good value in systems. Sorry, where am I here? There we are. Okay, this can go here. So this system is for a client that owns air and vac machines throughout the New York State, tri-state area. They're expanding their business all the time, which is good because there's lots of work to do for them. So there's an iPad app. I didn't build the initial system here. Someone else built the system, and I got called in when that person decided that they expected to take over and run the company, and that wasn't going to happen. And so they quit, stole equipment and the database, and left. Them locked out of the system. We were able to get in, and I since have made lots of changes to it. So some of the screens are theirs, like this screen down here. Some of the stuff is mine. I've done as much as they didn't want to get involved in a complete redesign, which we discussed. I'm still working on removing the classic theme from a bunch of layouts. I haven't seen any real problems from it yet, although I know people say there are problems, but I've yet to see them. So anyway, this one function, I was building a wizard for them to enter in new clients, because there's a lot of data they need to collect. And they also have clients that will be contracted to them, and then the station closes, or they decide they don't want to use it, they sell the station. And so they're a record in the customer database, but that's closed. So they never get to reuse them that way. So the wizard, the first part of the wizard is that they would type in their IP at the zip code, and it would find any specific sites in that zip code that are closed. And then they're presented with a list of them. They could edit the address if it was typed in wrong, select that, click through the screens, and go through the various process of collecting the data. They get the site information, who the owner is, payment information, and this part is about the machines. So they have a whole list of machine types, and the initial screens that the other developer had set up to this that had this. And basically it was just air and vac, how many, what's the monthly fee, and what's the commission we're expecting. Those two fields are pretty standard these days. It's 50%, and the monthly fee goes up by $1 here and there. But the quantity, this interface gave them no options for the specific type of machine. They just, in which there are, as you saw, a number of them. So, so initially I designed this with a portal, which was easy because actually when they get to the screen, this already is preloaded with this data. And that's already preloaded. As they click through, it loads the data in. And then they just have to select the type. So where this is, there was a portal. And the tech who was responsible for new installs, that portal goes directly to the inventory table. There's an inventory database here. Again, this is their screen. I only say that because I kind of pride myself, as we all do probably, on our look and feel. So, but at any rate, it generates a serial number and puts it into the table, into that database. And he didn't want that. He said, I don't want it created until I'm ready to do the install, because sometimes they want a different quantity of machines, or they want another machine. So I said to myself, well, I don't want to have to, what am I going to do? Create a separate table to store all this data? What am I going to do with it? So I decided that I would use JSON, one field, and create listings of what was being put in. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So very simple. I mean, a lot of this is probably pretty basic for those of you who are super good at JSON and the while function. But so basically, as they select the items, as they select these items from here, I create these records. So, but I can't display that to the end user. So I was like, well, how am I going to display this now? And I decided I'd use the while function. So this field here, get this off screen for a sec. This field here is a text field that is a calculation that evaluates the code and creates this. So I have this, let's see, set letter code. Oh, that was this one. Okay, sorry. Test display. Right. So the script that the script. So here's the while function to display the code. I'm assuming this is big enough for everybody. So I guess a little background on the while statement for those who haven't used it. I did open the web page on that. I thought I did. Here, let's just go back to here. I do actually like the new, I don't know if you guys do, but I do actually like the new help system that FileMaker implemented with this. I think it's pretty snappy. And it's available at the click of a button, you know. So basically the idea is this is broken down into different segments. So if, let's see, let's go back to here and go in here. And if I just take and open one of these up, let me just type. All right, so there's different segments. The initial variables, basically similar to a let statement where you set up your variables, set them with a value or with nothing. If you're going to use a variable, it's got to be set up in the initial variable set in this section, but it could just be equal nothing if you wanted to, if you're going to be populating it later in the logic. The condition is how you exit the function, the logic, and then the result. So the biggest thing to learn in this for me was the condition, because if the condition is true, it keeps functioning. You have to have a false condition in order for it to exit. And the first one I did of these took a little while to get that, but I eventually did. Let's take a look at the actual function. So the first thing I'm doing is grabbing a pattern count of basically, I'm deciding how many records there are in my JSON field. I know some people use value count here, and I think that includes the trailing return, but I just have always used pattern count +1. The counter is 1, and I'm going to be using a result that is going to start off as 0. And this is the section separated by brackets that you set up your variables. Again, I'm using the ellipse so I can see them easily throughout the calculations. This is where I had to change my logic, because normally in loops, when I do them, I usually say if the counter is greater than or equal to the count that I have, exit the loop. And that's always prior to the incrementation of the counter up 1 value. This required it. I see the admit button. Should I hit that? Admit button? Yeah, I'll hit it or whatever.
Hold on. I think we're good. I got to go let one person in.
They might have come in, but anyway, I had to reverse this concept to get these to work. So anyway, what this does is I'm saying if there's anything in the if there's something in the result, then give me the result and a return, and then add the rest of the values. And all I'm doing is I'm using my counter to step through the records and set up. I'm using the get value based on the counter, and I'm saying, okay, the first thing I want is the quantity, the type, commission, monthly fee, and this is a commission incentive program. I'm incrementing the counter and I'm getting my result. Oh, the other thing I want to mention, very important, set precision. If you're going to experiment with the while function, put set precision, encase it in this. Because the first time I did this, I crashed FileMaker because it started calculating and it never stopped. Because it won't. It will just keep going. If your exit condition isn't set up properly, it'll just keep going. So figure out basically the number of iterations you would need. In this case, they're not going to put any more than 10 machines in. I'd set 10 as the, so this way, if as you're building it, it will drop out and give you a question mark before it crashes FileMaker, which is always nice. So that's the simple part that does that. It's relatively straightforward. Then from there, let's see, what else was part of this? Okay, so let me see my notes. So the add function is very simple script. This I don't know if is this too small. But anyway, it's a very simple script. I'm evaluating first. I'm evaluating that the fields are full. That there's data here, minus the commission incentive because that's not used for everybody. And then the first thing I have to do is determine if the machine type has been entered into the JSON field. And that was an interesting thing because initially I was like, normally I would just say, well, I would get a list of, I could get a list of type and I could say, well, pattern count, if air's in there. But the problem is they have air, they have digital air, they have dual air. So I had to match the whole string. I couldn't just match on a pattern count. So test for existing. So I came up with another while function for this. Again, I set my precision again, I'm taking it's similar to the other. I'm grabbing the JSON code and I'm using a counter, the field that will be the match and the new type, which is the list of new types, but that's basically this field here. It's a global field. It's what the user selects. And again, the result is empty. So in this case, I'm still using the counter dropout. So if there's no match, it just ends out and the end result is 0 and I don't have to worry about it. Or if there's a match, dropout, so it doesn't just have to run through this cycle every time. I thought I would display where the match was, but I know already because they've selected it. So I know where the match was, that this is actually there. So I'm actually not sure I really need the match anymore. You know how that happens when you're developing, you put something in and it works and then you're like, well, do I need to take this out? I don't know. Anyway, what I'm saying here is I'm saying if the new type matches the type that's in there, I wish I did this landscape. But get value type. Then so it's a case statement, right? So if it is, give me the type. I want to know the type. If it did, I want to put the type in the match and otherwise nothing. And then if it's empty, the result, give me the match. And once match has a value, I'm out because and then I'm just saying, result equals list types 1, and I'm saying, okay, there it is. So as I do this, if I was to select digital air again, it's going to tell me that's duplicate. And I found that to be, well, what easy is a relative term, but I want to learn the while function. I want to get really good at it because I never got good at custom functions with recursive. I never got good at that. And this I think is the actual replacement for that. You don't need to go to that. So I'm sure there's reasons to, but I haven't found it. So so that was the first step in this script. And and then after that, I'm just setting the values in. Wait a second, which one is this? Machine right. Yeah, then I'm just setting the I'm setting the field to well, here's the JSON code that I'm setting, which is pretty straightforward. It's just set element, the type, commission. I'm sure anyone who's done JSON once has done this, and it's very straightforward. That, and then I'm just, the next section is saying if there's something here, make a new line. So that does that part. And then the display was the next thing I had to work out. So let it go to JSON display. So here again, I'm iterating through the function. Again, I'm just, the top part is basically the same. And what I'm doing here is I'm just getting my result, and I'm saying, okay, get my first element. I want the quantity, the type, and I'm putting tabs in between the values. So I'm saying, all right, as I loop through, get me the first one, and I want the quantity, the type, commission, monthly fee, commission incentive, loop through all this and exit when you're done. So let me see, I can make this a little smaller here. It's weird doing this also, not seeing faces and everything. And it's like, and there's no question. Normally in New York.
Talking into a tin can, right, John?
Exactly.
Yeah, do you want, John, do you want questions in line, or?
People are welcome to chime in. Especially if you don't understand it or you want to know something, you have questions specifically about what I'm showing. But in our New York, we generally have a pretty raucous meeting and people interrupt all the time, and it's very lively that way. So feel free.
So, hey, John, I'll jump in with the tabs. Are you doing, people were chatting about like contests, and I think one of the contests is like a virtual list versus a single field with tab text to simulate a table. I was just waiting to see if that's what you're doing with the tabs you just talked about.
That's another it's another anomaly. I haven't embraced virtual lists yet. I know I should, and at some point I will do it, but I just haven't. And so no, this is basically, this field is a text field. It's actually over here.
I actually like that approach better than often better than a virtual list, because it's a text field and you've got tab stops, I reckon.
Yeah, there's no table necessary, but it's remarkably close, kind of conceptually, to a virtual list approach.
I mean, it looks the same. It just doesn't have the same.
Well,
it doesn't have the overhead.
Right, it's one field, and then basically, this is the calculation that I'm using to generate the data, and then there's two ways I've done this numerous times for different things to display stuff like this. And sometimes I will actually use a merge field, and a merge field can be good because when you do a merge field, you can set. So let me just slide this out of the way for a sec. This is a live system, but they're not in right now. So if anyone's wondering, so basically I could do this way, and then when you click in here, you can turn on sample data. And then you can throw in, actually you can't, that's right. You can't see the sample data on this. So you have to kind of throw some tab stops in.
Yep.
Look at it, click back in, and, it works pretty straightforward. But
so
John,
how do you handle the sorting of those values? Because that's when I'm thinking of a virtual list, one of the things that's really cool about a virtual list is once you've got that list displayed, you can perform finds on it. You can sort the records however you want. How are you? Because JSON arrays are ordered.
They are.
JSON objects are not ordered. JSON
right.
objects are an unordered list.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, in this case, it doesn't matter the order that they are put in. They don't really care. They just need to see the list of machines they need to add.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an issue here, and most of the times. this is the only time I've done JSON and while to do a listing like this. I've done other types of calculations, and it wasn't something that actually I've used execute SQL where you can sort it.
Yep. Right.
So that's one of the other ways I've done it. The way I did this one is, why is this here? I've got this bar all of a sudden appeared. Let me just move this down a little. I can't get to the.
Oh, it's the zoom bar. You can grab it and move it.
Oh, what did I do? I'm sorry, I turned off my.
Just stop sharing, but you can grab that bar and move it wherever you want.
Yeah, there it is. Throw it over there. Okay, good. So yeah, I just wanted to open up this. And I'll just key sequence to do this. So the way I did this one is I just used the tab stops here. I just did this, and and this way you can see it. So as you put the tab stops in, you can immediately see what happens. You can readjust them, and it works fine. It's a simple display. So the display was was that code there. Then I needed to give them the ability to remove something. Again, and I know that there's probably many other ways to do this, but I just did this where I said, all right, let me just number them. You want to clear the whole thing and start again, go ahead. Otherwise, you want to get rid of 2, just do that. Take 2 out. I hope they're not confused by quantity, because that's the first value. I have to see how they react to this, but select the number to delete. You can select the number and that's fine. So I can add something back and do an error. So we have a few items there.
How long is that? How long is that select type? How many items are they selecting from?
That's the list right there.
That's the whole list.
That's the whole list.
Yeah.
I mean, this could change over time because
the reason you didn't do this with the pick list being like a portal where they could pick from, and then it would drop off the portal as they pick them instead of going this route.
Because they did not want the inventory records created initially. They want, because the Don, the tech who does the new installs, wanted to do that himself at the time of installation, because they might need to change quantities, add a machine, subtract a machine, depending, because things change. They just wanted to know what the tech who booked the job, what they said they wanted then. And it's generally they're putting in an air and a vac, and maybe credit card errors. They're using, most stations have 2 machines. Some have 3 or 4. So to remove them, I needed to generate a little list there. Display list to remove. So it's heavy while here. It's like, so again, it's basically very similar, except here I'm just saying, give me the counter, number it, and give me the type. So I have a list with a number and the type. And then when they type the number in, I can remove it. So remove here, I have this one. This is the script for this. So, so basically the idea is when they click the script and they put the number in, if that global is empty, then we're not doing anything yet. So then I'm saying if they chose the last record, if the pattern count, if it equals the count of records there, then I know I need to remove this is being used if they're clearing the whole thing. This just clears it. Else I'm substituting with a carriage return in front of the value. Otherwise, the carriage returns after the value. So if the first one's coming out, I need to remove that and the return. If the last one's coming out, I need to remove the return and the last one. So So that's the way that worked.
John, whenever I use that technique where I'm, parsing a list and I have to make sure I'm going to include the carriage returns because you want to make sure you're getting the whole value, I always put a carriage return at the top and at the bottom. That's the way, and then
Yeah,
you don't run into that problem.
I just didn't want there to be a return at the top of this list. I wanted the list.
Oh yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah.
And that's yeah, that's always been that's removing items from a list. The two returns on both sides is, if they're not viewing it, is the best method. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. But here I wanted it to look good, so for them. So
I have a question, John.
Yeah.
A quick one. So if I understand you correctly, this is kind of like a temporary holding concept that does not affect the inventory until the time it needs to be. So do you use this to change inventory? Do you do anything with this other than just display it?
Well, yes. It's used to create. Well, the inventory is probably not the best word. These are the active machines in the field. These are the machines they have on site that currently. Initially, this was the whole system was a mess when I took it over, but we ended up adding an archive. So if the station closes or if the machine's broken and they have to bring it back to refurbish it, they can archive the record so that machine information is saved. And then this database now is clean and I can run reports on the performance of these items. Sorry.
Aliens are calling.
So
Bad phone.
no, that's okay. I'll talk to them later. So now I can run reports on this. So basically what happens is the tech is going to come in and go into new install tracking. Actually, let me just go here because I want to be at the first record. Sorry. Let me just swap this. Okay, I just want to be at the first record, and so this is the screen. They come in here, and this is the data they have currently to deal with the new records. The iPad version. I've actually been talking to this client. How are we doing for time?
Thank you for asking. We started you about 5 minutes late. I think you got 5, or maybe stretch it to 10. I'm going to yield some of my time to you guys, but
okay. So I just want to know how far to get
if you can do it in 5, maybe 10, then we'll hand it over to Vince.
We're pretty well there. So okay. The iPad version file, they're using cellular because they're all over the place and Wi-Fi may or may not work. I mean, I talked to them about scrapping the cellular and getting Wi-Fi. Like I can go to my library and get a hotspot and drive in my car to Massachusetts and stay connected to the internet. It's amazing. And they give it to you for free and they're cheap, but they're doing it this way. The other thing I've talked to them about is taking and making this an app that sits on and uses the data API to transfer data back and forth because they're doing collections. So they're going to go to a site and they're going to go through, they're performing collections on this. They're selecting the machines, putting in the meter reads, getting, there's all sorts of stuff going on, which is all happening live into this database. Then when they're ready, they can print reports from here of the collections for the day and download them into the main system. It's the way it was, and you can only do so much with a client. So I just, did what I could. I'd love to see them just separate this out and use it as a separate app on the iPads. But I think, in the end result, the text would be in much better shape there. They wouldn't have to worry about slow connections over cellular and stuff. But in the end, so those records, my point in saying that is these records, this is the customer table. this is customers. This is the same table as this. So this field exists in here. And because once they get to this point, they've already created the record. Either they've taken an existing closed account and turned it on again, or they've taken and created a new record in the customer database. So I didn't want to add a ton of fields to, this was the easiest way, 2 fields, and I've got all the data the guy needs to put these in. And so I've been working on that part now. That's just about finished. On this screen here, I've got them set up where they can just add all of them, or if they want to change quantities, they can like step through and change the quantities. And the other thing I have to add for them is the ability to add a machine that's not in the list. But they can just, if everything's the way it is and they want all that, add all, we'll just add all the, and I can show you basically, if I'm adding all the machines, I'm first going to just check off that actually there's something in the field that right now I'm not doing I'm not evaluating whether the specific machine was entered. It's just if there's something in there, once you click the button, that's it. You're doing it some other way, but that might change. And then basically once we're doing this, it's a double loop because each machine record could be multiple, right? So I'm doing 2 digital. So I have to loop the field for the number of machines, the number of individual machines I'm putting in, and then loop for the quantity of that specific machine. So I've broken this out into into 2 different scripts where the script that actually creates the records is a related script. And I did that because there's another function that uses it as well. So it's one-stop shopping if I have to change things. So basically I'm getting the count of the first grouping. Then I'm saying, well, okay, now what's the quantity I'm doing for this specific one, right? So I'm getting and then I'm going and sending this script parameter out to that script and create the machines. It's just a simple, it doesn't use magic keys because I'm actually in the table when I'm doing this. No, this actually does use the magic key. Clear the global variable and create all your fields. Create all the records. So there's one function that does this through a double loop, and then add machines, and that's about adjust quantity. The adjust quantity one puts up a card window, does the same thing because I'm looping through again the same way, but here I'm setting the machine type and the quantity into, I'm setting the machine type and the quantity here, and then giving them the ability to change it. So, and that requires a commit. So I'm pausing, they do that, the button, the continue button resumes, commits the record, then I'm taking my new quantity and I'm sending that along with the JSON of the rest of the data for that. I'm sending the quantity is actually the data they typed in. So, and which may not change. They could leave it as it is, it won't matter, but it's taking the value from there. So, that's the basic idea of the whole kind of structure of this. And then, I don't know if there's any.
That's very cool. I'm always impressed with every meeting you're coming up with some other complicated business logic situation that you've got all these technical customers. So that's pretty cool. So
from the minds of clients, I've had the most bizarre logic in business I've ever seen. It's just some people just
you're all kinds of industries you're working in.
Which is the reason why we have custom software businesses. If everyone did everything the same, it would all be off the shelf because everyone would be doing everything the same.
Right.
So let's take a couple real quick questions. Hand it over to Vince. Vince, you got the full allocation. I practiced and I'm a little bit less than 40 minutes for me. Any just one pithy question for John? We'll have some time after the presents, or just a round of applause.
Yay!
All right, I'll stop the screen sharing and hand it over to you, Tony.
Okay, and then I'm going to bounce it back to you, Vince. Vince, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, am I ready? Hold on. So let me think. Your name jumped up. Oh, reclaim host. And then,
Doesn't Vince just need to click the share screen button?
well, it works either way. If he says share screen, I get a
Yeah.
message. If you can either be proactive or reactive. And that was proactive. Okay, so here's your introduction. Everybody knows Vince Manano. And if you don't, you're about to find out. Vince, up to you. Who are you?
Okay, yeah. So basically, two topics I'm covering today, and thank you, Tony, for the invite. I'm happy to see so many familiar faces here. Two topics are one is just a quick update on a developer tool that I have been working on for many years, and many of you know it. It's called Inspector.
Did you
then
almost
a
say the
follow-up.
old name there, Vince?
Yes. Actually, the old name is DocuScript, if you really go back that
I
far.
do remember, yes.
Yeah. So lots of exciting things going on in this area for me, and I don't have anything official to announce today. Some really cool things are going on, so stay tuned. But a quick 5-minute tour of this, but because I talk about this first, I'm just going to introduce myself. Vincenzo Manano, Director of FileMaker Development. I work at Beeswax. We have a blog that many people like to look up content from, and there's some great contributors to that blog. As a matter of fact, Fabio often posts there as well. He's on here at this meeting. And if you want to meet some of the bees, there's a whole Meet the Bees section on that page. There's different ways to reach me. That's going to be shown at the end as well. I have 2 kids, Fiorella and Luciano, and they keep me incredibly busy. Things that I like to do, I like hiking, biking, traveling, architecture, precision engineering, something I've come to learn about myself in my later years. I'm actually fascinated with sharp knives, parking backwards, kind of concepts about being ready. And so it made me think that sometimes the transactional mindset is about being ready, delivering data, and not having to wait for the data to calculate. So anyway, that's my second topic. But this is a street in Germany, which fascinates me. A lot of people park backwards. Anyway, diving into Inspector, just going to highlight some really cool new features in this 7.1 release. We have a dashboard that shows the progression of your solution over time, whether you're knocking away problems and the code increase in the different areas, calculation, dependencies, items. So it's very handy, especially if you work as a team. And talking about team, there's a whole focus on Inspector that is team collaboration. We have notes, we have tags, we have manual references, we have Slack support. So if you're using Slack, you can use Slack to send messages when you create a solution is deleted, analysis begins processing, completes processing, analysis deleted, and problems are fixed. So a lot of area of focusing on team collaboration. One interesting area is manual references that we added in the version 7. And it allows you to add a reference to something that might be referenced from an external source. So if you have a script that's being used from some other outside source, it allows you to make a reference to it so that you can track it and see that it is being used rather than showing up with 0 references. So if you have an API or something like that, it's a great way to mention that this script is used by that external API. So we have Logicator support for searching across the board, and we have something called global searching that we added in this 7.0 release, which is really cool. We never had that, and a lot of our team members kind of use it to be able to track down snippets of text that are used either anywhere in calculations or anywhere in the schema. We have something called table distance. I won't get into it too much here, but it helps with troubleshooting layout performance, number of hops that a field or a portal is having to go. So if you have a layout or a field or a portal on a layout, you can see how many hops away it's coming from. So it's helpful to see if when you're troubleshooting performance on a layout to see those things surface. Layout styles, again, I invite you to look at some of the videos about these different features to better understand what this information is, but it's very comprehensive and detailed. And a lot of this stuff, if you see these things here, you can link to the underlying objects to go and find them and address them or correct them. Security perspective, again, how many times have you been in security dialogue and you want to see from the perspective of another privilege set, a specific layout or script or field or table or value list and see whether or not, that is, accessible or not accessible. This gives it to you in one click of a button so that you don't have to do all that hunting and pecking. So really, really handy when you're trying to understand the perspective of security from different privilege sets on an item. We have a ton of information that we normalize, and I'll just give one example here out of about 110 areas. So script steps, for example, you can pick a script step, and you can see all the places where that step is referenced. So, and that's just one area out of like 110, like I mentioned. The other cool thing is we are ready for M1. We've been testing our plugin for a native version of a FileMaker, and I'm happy to say that it is 50 to 60% faster. And if you have not gotten your hands on an M1 machine, you will be astounded. It's an amazing machine. I can't say enough great things about it. And I can't wait for M2, M3, M4, whatever comes next, because Apple hit the ball out of the friggin' park with this. It's absolutely incredible. Just to give you an example, I run a lot of tests on my machine. This is an Intel machine I'm on right now, my M1. When I first got it, I ran tests next to it, and same tests on this machine. And I had to plug this machine in multiple times. The M1 was running, never plugged it in, never heard the fan. I don't even believe there is a fan in there, but it's absolutely amazing. So can't wait. You guys get 20% off if you've been a previous customer. Contact us and we'll get you upgraded. Otherwise, if you want to be a new customer, we'll welcome you to join and use Inspector. This is the discount code. And that's it for Inspector. Any questions about this before I jump off to my other presentation? Just that was a quick kind of recap of where we're at with this version. And again, we're ready for M1.
Vince, I got one
launch
question. You mentioned videos. Do you have videos about the inspector?
Yeah, they're on the site.
Okay.
And
right.
I will not do it now, but if someone wants to post
I'll drop
it,
a link. I'll drop a link.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. All right. Any other questions before I dive into my main presentation? Cool. All right. So we can dive right in. I don't have to say who I am anymore. I commented out those slides. So this presentation is like a part 2 of a multi-part presentation about the benefits and value of transactions.
Oh, wait.
So yeah.
I think we might have some questions about
Inspector.
Oh,
okay.
So you're just doing the XML DDR still? Are you not using the XML export at all?
Yeah. So save as XML. It's
okay.
primary. That's supposed to be kind of the new XML. However, the primary goal of that XML is for the use of add-ons and the update feature that they're still working on. the XML from the DDR version to the save as XML version, they're very, very different and for different purposes. And one of the main issues that maybe a lot of us third-party vendors haven't embraced it yet is because there's some big areas missing. And so, you know, we're slow to kind of move there, and Claris is also slow to get those pieces done. But anyway, as soon as all that stuff is done, you'll see the different vendors move over to using it. And there's some really exciting new things that they've added, and if they do some of the things that have been requested, it's going to be really exciting, like being able to save it on server, for example, would be something that then you can just run a scheduled process every day to output it and process it, etc. So very, very cool that what's coming, and I hope soon. Any other questions? So Eric, to answer your question, Inspector 7.1 still uses the DDR. It's not using the new format, but yeah.
Okay, just wondering.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. So in part one, I just kind of go recap of some of the areas that we covered in part one. We covered native FileMaker development, how transactions work there. We talked about transactional considerations. We talked about network monitor tool, and then we talked about release debug. We went in more detail than we will go in this presentation about that tool. And network monitor tool was my favorite tool before release debug became available. And now I'm pretty much using release debug. And I'll talk about it briefly in this presentation, but I encourage everyone to have some way to measure when you're making some changes to be able to see the impact that it has on your solutions for users that are on a WAN, especially. You know, the impact is more dramatic if you're on a WAN, and a lot of us working from home have that situation. So how, you know, we talked about delivering data. We had a transaction refresher. We did transactional delete, entering data, and we're going to cover about some aspects of the way we do edits and creates in this part as well too. Okay, so part two, we're going to define transactions, the native way and the transactional way. And then we're going to talk about free stuff that we're getting just by the fact that we stay current with the latest version of FileMaker, and some cool, exciting stuff there too. Level of difficulty, and I'll cover that in my slide and talk about how transaction really has two levels of difficulty, in my opinion. The benefits of release debug, transactional opportunities, and I break these down in three areas: stored values, auditing, and locking. And I'll talk about that. And then we have some demos. Okay, so definitions: transaction, an input message to a computer system that must be dealt with as a single unit of work. In FileMaker terms, the ability to create, update, or delete data records all as one atomic transaction. Native FileMaker inherently is transactional. When you edit a related record in a portal, you're locking the parent and the related record at the same time. When you commit that record, you're committing both records. So FileMaker inherently is already transactional. If you do things where, like, you're just doing native FileMaker, you go to browse mode, you go to layout, you find a record, you create or update or delete a record. While that record is being edited, it's locked. But again, if you had related data, all those other related records would also be locked. So inherently, you're already doing transactions. The topic of free stuff, basically over the years, FileMaker has improved the caching, and we got those improvements for free simply by being on the latest version. So I love this quote. Robert quoted it in one of his presentations. There are only two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things. And oftentimes I struggle trying to find the right names for fields or other aspects of a solution to be clear and concise. So that's interesting from the point of view of what we're going to talk about in relation to transactions and how we edit data. So we're inherently building kind of like a cache of the data locally, and I'll talk about that in, coming up soon. Release debug, again, there is information in my next slide of how to set this up. Basically, it's just a text file that you can put in your applications directory, and it's a different location on Windows. I don't remember where that is on Windows, but I'm sure someone will post it. Otherwise, there's a good blog post on Soliant's website that talks about these flags, and so basically, what you want to do is you want to, have the system as you have it now. Run the test that you're going to do, and then have the system again as you have made changes to it, and then compare all those log entries. And I built this file to parse the log from the location that you start off with, and it reads the lines of the log from there till you say stop. And basically it collapses the lines into the bytes sent and the bytes received, so they're all on one line, and you can see the number of calls and the number of bytes sent and received. I would like to release this file. I just kind of working on final details as to the UI of it and other aspects of it. So expect a blog post hopefully sometime soon on this file so you can use this to also analyze and test your systems with it. I did some testing with that release debug, and it's interesting to see the benefits that we get, even just simply opening the file. So here's a perfect example of the cache that FileMaker has been improving since, I don't remember now, maybe version 16 or something. And it was a little bumpy road for a while, but it's gotten better. And if you open a file frequently, a lot of the downloading of some of the tables of like scripts and layout information and even data for that matter is cached locally. And so when you open it up again, you'll see a huge dramatic performance improvement in just opening the file, among other things. So again, this was measured using the release debug file log. Okay, but wait, there is more free stuff, and it's not beer, it's M1. And again, I can't say enough great things about this, but it's going to be really amazing once FileMaker Claris officially releases what they have coming, because everything on this machine is faster. And FileMaker runs in Rosetta currently on this machine, and it's about the same, maybe somewhat, some places even faster than the Intel equivalent, but there's some really great things happening there. So getting back to transactions, I break it down into two separate categories: the easy side and the difficult side. The easy side is basically the execution of the transaction itself, creating up, editing, and deleting records, and how to build that is very easy. Where it can get very difficult is doing things like locking the records so that you can tell people that changes have been happening in the records that they're about to edit, especially in the mechanism and the way that we make these edits. And so being able to report back to the user like, hey, while you were making these changes on this record, someone else changed it already on the server. So would you like to just push your changes through, or would you like to rather reload the data and then make your edits based on the changes so you can see how you would enter that data? So thinking about record locking because you might want to handle it differently. The fact that you have a transaction in the first place gives you the benefit of also auditing at the same time. So as you make all the changes, you can actually log changes that you've made. And so you can roll that in as part of your transaction. So that is not easy. It can be done, but it takes some effort. And then the more challenging aspect is how to move. And the real benefit of using transactions is moving from unstored calcs to stored values. Basically denormalizing your data. So a perfect example would be where you have a lot of a list view of data, and you have related records, and you have unstored calcs based on the related data. And for each one of those records, FileMaker is talking back and forth to the server to get the related data to calculate your unstored calculations. So basically, I like to say, as artists, as designers and architects of data systems, when you know the rules and you know how to break them, then you can venture off in this territory. This is kind of a side note here. I don't know if any of you are doing this, but I mean, sometimes I went into my graph recently. I gave a presentation, and Matt Petrovsky saying, "Hey, what's that over there?" Basically, you can add emojis to your graph. Those are just text objects. That's a text object with an emoji in it. And basically, the other one is just a bunch of underscores to represent a line. So you can spruce up your graph and add kind of documentation to different areas of your graph just by adding emojis. And we add them in our scripts. We add them in different areas of our solution. Okay, so let's look at a demo. So here, let's go look at this first demo. And I've recorded all my demos so that I don't have to futz with, live connection or anything like that. So basically, this is just a refresher. I like doing these things. These are kind of time-lapse mock-ups and descriptions of things. So basically, currently, FileMaker is like, you as user A modifies a record, user B tries to modify that record, but that record is locked, and that record lock is maintained by the server. So when the user commits the record, then the changes are then also sent back to user B, and the record is updated dynamically by FileMaker. So the other thing that we used to do, or had explored doing, is when we first started this, is we put the data from the record into globals, and we used a popover window, or we used a card window, and that was okay, so long as you only have one window and one record. But then if you had two records, if you use this technique, you had two different windows, then the problem would be that the data in record one, if you started editing record two, if you haven't finished, editing record one, now you'd have data from record two in your edit of record one, which is a bad thing. And so we abandoned that, and we ended up going down the road, another road, which I'll describe here, which is now our preferred technique is when we open a file, we deploy what is called a local file. And so basically, in the hosted file, there is a file that has predetermined schema that when we deploy that file, we define a variable file reference to the location where we deploy that file, and then the tables in that local file are accessible in the hosted file. But the beauty in that is that anything that you put in a local file doesn't communicate with the server. So now what we do is we edit record one, and we create a card window based on a table occurrence that comes from the local file. And so anything you do there is all local. There's no communication with the server. And so that means that we could have two different windows where we have two different card windows, and you have two different cards with points to two different records in the local file. And so there's no crosstalk. It resolves the problem about the globals. And this is kind of like our approved technique. And then basically we just package up the JSON. We do the same thing. We send it to the server, and then that data is transacted.
So Vince, there's a
Moving-
lot of
yeah.
there's a lot of information coming at us fast here. One of my questions that you have in this diagram,
I only
are
have-
you
yeah.
are you locking that record?
No,
Before you
and I'm
bring it
going to
client side?
describe that next.
Okay.
I'm going to describe that next. So some of our projects, or many of our projects, when we mention that, you know, the record could be edited locally for some time and another user could get in there before them and make changes to it, the answer was, so long as we have an audit trail, we don't care. That was the answer. But some of us might care that, you know, hey, you know, I want to be able to report to the users, you know, this idea that, hey, the record was changed, and in some examples in the past, people have used get record modification count, and we found that that's not really a good thing to use. Rather, what we do is we build different hashes, and so we have the current state hash, we have the future state hash, and the past state. So current state is what is on the server, what the current state is at the time that you submit your data to be transacted.
Yeah.
Future state is what you're modifying it right now in your card window, in your local file. And past state is what you had the data in the record when you pulled it into your local record. Okay, and then what you do is you compare different ways. So you can compare future to the past, and you do that on the server, because you don't want to do it locally, because if the server is really busy with a huge import, you might not get record updates sent to you, and you want to do it at the very moment that you're about to transact the record. So so basically, this is a way to deal with the fact that you know, the record could be modified by two different users at the same time. Now, the reason we use hashes is because some people might be interested in only a subset of the fields on a specific record. And maybe, you know, it doesn't matter if the record's been modified by two different users, because the record was modified, you know, maybe two different fields of
Two
the
different
record
ways.
were modified in two different ways. But every one of these things is for up for questioning, because business logic might prevail where it's like, hey, I might need to know that, you know, data in the group of fields that belong to the B hash were changed, and how they were changed, because my decision of what I put in the group of fields in A might be based on that. So once you determine if the hash has been modified for any of the fields that you want to represent, then you could tell the user, like, say, hey, you know, this got changed. What do you want to do? Do you want to take the changes and put them in, or do you want to refresh the record and then review before you submit your changes? So meaning that the locks can be managed and handled in this way. Okay. Any questions about that before I move on?
It's a lot to take
Okay.
in this fast, Vince. I got to
Yeah,
just gotta
that's
say.
yeah. I know, and apologize because
It's
I kind
okay.
of squeezed in two different topics. But you know, there's the recording, right?
Yeah, good thing
Exactly.
we're
I'll have to
recording.
go watch it 3 or
Yeah.
4 times, and then I may catch up.
Yeah. But basically, I learned that record modification count doesn't really help us.
It's not
I
surgical enough for
prefer-
you.
Yeah, exactly. Good way to put it. Okay, so that's this video. Moving on to the next one. I mean, this one here talks about our transaction table, and I'm going to get to it. I'm going to show you the transaction table and give you a small demo. And one of my pet peeves is that you know, in every single table on a lot of systems that we use, we always have these created by, created at, modified by, modified at. And I think it's, you know, especially when you think about normalization, it's such a waste. You know, like if we had a built-in kind of auditing table for anything that got audited anywhere, that's where those fields should be. And the record should point to that data And so you could pull that data out from there and see it. Anyway, that's what the transaction table is for us. And we have those fields there because we build and edit transactions for create, update, and delete. And so we have a transaction table, we have a kind of a related auditing segment that's related to transactions. And then we have these table occurrences that hang off of the transaction table that are for different tables that we want to transact data on. Okay, so you know, you create a new record, basically you unpack the JSON, you create an update through the relationships. If any errors happen along the way, basically you revert and no data gets transacted. That's the gist of it. And this is basically the tables that are involved. So if we go to the example here, this is an example that shows it in action. And we're going to step through the debugger. And basically, we're going to select that window on the left. We're going to create a record. And that record, the key to all this is not commit the transaction record. And so in that table, in the transaction table, there's basically only one field. That's the ID field. And it's got a relationship to the parent table, and it's got a relationship to the colors table. And so what we just did is we created a new color, and then we're gonna get a pointer to a key that belongs in the color table, and we're gonna delete those records in the child table. So as long as we recycle the ID, as long as we don't commit it, we can keep deleting, editing, creating at our heart's content. Okay, so now we're gonna delete the parent record, which we just did. Okay, and then we're going to delete some more child records, some more colors from this person. And so we're going to delete a few more records. And then we're going to update a record. So we get a key to a record, and we're going to change the color. So I'm going to change that color to burgundy. And so all these changes up to now were not committed. And then if you revert, all the changes come back, right? So all the record creation, all the edits, all the deletes, if you just revert that record, that transaction record, and because you didn't commit it, all those changes are in memory, and reverting that just basically wipes out all the changes. So that's the easy part. That's really easy to do. It's straightforward. There's only one field in this transaction table, and it's just got a relationship over to different portals for these for this table and another one for this table. And I'm using numeric keys just so that it's easier to see, but you can use the UIDs, of course, and then the same thing works there. Any questions about that? How am I doing for time, Tony? Almost done.
I think you're doing good. You're doing good. I'm thinking, the hard out would be 7:30. I wouldn't mind 7:25. And if you're almost done, I think we're doing good.
Yeah, I'm almost done. I have two more
Yeah.
videos.
So then I'll jump off and let you resume.
Okay, so this is this is using the release debug log. Let me see if I talk about it here. So in this example, I'm going to show is the benefits of kind of a strange example, but basically we're going to look at this data here that has a summary fields along the top. It has 1,056 rows of data, and it has a related sales data for each one of these countries, and how many sales, total sales, and if you're on a LAN, or if you're, like you've got the file locally, this is a piece of cake. And but the problem is that these summary fields up here are aggregating across all these records, and there's 1,056 records. So it's aggregating the total count of all these sales across all these records. So meaning that over a network, FileMaker is going to send you all the data not just for these sales like these region records, but for all the sales records related to each one of these country records. So basically, it's going to send you everything. And because of that, the numbers that you see, where was it here, shows you the benefits of moving to a transactional model, where if you store the data and you were to view this data, it would take you 4.8 seconds roughly to see the results of that list versus 663 seconds. So huge, huge difference in performance. So if we look at the video of this in action, so, and this is using the release debug. And again, this is a kind of a rough back end way to set up the start and the stop of it. And so if I fast forward this, because we're not going to want to watch this go through hundreds of records here, and then we stop it, there isn't much to see here when we stop it, but basically I'll show you in the next video the equivalent of the stored value of that. So this is the stored part. So if we run it and we create another test, and we say, now I'm going to look at stored data, and we look at it, and presto, there's my data. And if we stop the result, the measurement with the release debug, and then compare it. So if I go and I look at the results, the group results, let's see here. So I have to go look at the script to run a script from the script menu. And so here's the results of that test, basically what I had shown before. So we're looking at 17 calls to the server when it's stored versus 4,030 calls, okay? And the bytes sent is dramatically different than in the case of unstored. So everything is like just showing you the benefits to move to stored values. Basically, it's a few calls to say, hey, I've got this data, just pull me down the data that I'm going to be showing in this list view, and I'm done. Versus, hey, I've got this data, pull me down these records, but wait, I got some related data. So hold on, get me these related records as well, and then keep going and repeat that for all the records because I've got these summary fields that need the data. So dramatic difference in architecture. The three main things that are the hard things to kind of talk about, and that is, this aspect of, stored values, auditing, and locks. So FileMaker aggregation functions do not work on uncommitted records. Okay, so 3 important points here to mention. Execute SQL, however, will return results from uncommitted records. And so the sweet spot is maybe if you're going to go down this approach of transactions to calculate the changes and update based on delta. And this introduces the topic, gives you things to think about, but not enough time to dive into those details. So those are 3 important points to consider when you're going to move from unstored values to stored values. When it comes to auditing, you can take advantage of the fact that, whoops, did I do anything here? It's over here. Take advantage of the fact that you have a transaction, you can put the audits in, and then again, kind of a reminder, don't use the record modification count. Instead, use get container attribute and generate your MD5 hashes that way. And then the last video, or second to last video, here's an example of a system in action. And so what you're seeing on the right are the local tables in the local file. And so as you're going to watch this, you're going to see actually I go into this, I talk about the local file. There's my global variable that's defining the local file and tells you where it is. So so those files are in my temp directory, but they're aliased in my graph, And so there's no communication to the server. So now if I create a task, a project and a bunch of tasks, even if I commit the record by clicking out of it, I'm not sending any traffic to the server. I create a bunch of related records. You're going to see the related records on the side. I fill out these records. I put in data for each of those records, right? And so you see the data showing up in the local record there. And then I will create the transaction. You'll see the record there. And if I go into the schema, let's see, oh, this is starting over. Sorry, apologize. This is the end of this video. And then the last video is the actual editing and looking at this, data here. So I'm editing the record now. Actually, I'm not sure if I'm actually creating. I'm creating a new one. So I step through here. I fill all this out.
Hey, Vince, keep going.
Yeah.
I'm going to squeeze myself down. Can you let Heidi in?
Oh,
I think you
where
might have the
this-
waiting room. I don't think I have the waiting room right now. Do you see a? Oh, no, keep going.
do
Host disabled
I-
participant.
I don't see an area to let someone in. Am I supposed to see that?
Maybe not.
Oh,
Okay.
Heidi. Yeah, here. I got it.
Okay.
She's in.
All right.
Yeah. Welcome, Heidi.
There you go.
Okay. So I got a few more minutes here. So
Yeah.
basically,
Keep,
I created it. There it is. Behind the scenes, we'll take a look at the transaction table. So we'll go to a new window. We'll go to a UI for the transactions. We'll go to the last transaction, right? And so the last transaction here, if I open my window a little bit wider, we'll see the details of the tables. So we created a project record. We created 3 task records, and then if you move over to the right, you'll see the changes to each of the fields that were logged there. So before and after for each of those fields. One of the very beautiful things about this transaction kind of approach is that we also built a UI for the auditing. And so let me make some changes here, and then I'll move over to the audit view of this. So I made some changes to the cost of an item and the status. If I go to the transaction view, you'll see that I made two record edits, and then you see the fields that were changed because of that. If we go over to the UI for auditing, so we go over to the audit manager, we select the table that is the project table, and one of the thoughts with this was we basically wanted to expose these fields to the user. That's why there's an allowed column, and but we didn't do that. So we just this is a developer behind the scenes developer kind of flag, and we just basically toggle these flags. And one important mention is that because everything is stored, we have the ability to we can do a number of things. We can calculate audits not only on stored values, but also on calculated values. And so if we fast forward this real quick, we'll make some more changes to the cost information of this project. We'll submit it. And because we turned on those audits, we'll look at that last record. We also see changes to calculated fields, not just static fields. So which is interesting concept to embrace, is the ability to actually log audit changes to calculated values. That's really it in terms of stuff I had to show. We talked about
let's
this.
do some questions. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. No, that's it. I mean, I was going to do a
that's
recap
beautiful,
of what I
and
covered.
I'm sure people have questions. And if someone is dropping links for, I know you've done a bunch of recorded presentations. You're kind of building a whole portfolio on this. I'm going to shut up, and I'd be interested to hear what questions people have.
I think I need to go back and watch the Cliff Notes. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems really, really remarkable, and I feel like I'm catching like 10% of what you said, and I need to go back to kind of first principles and digest it again. Maybe others just figured it all out, but
No, yeah, Charlie,
yeah.
I think the probably the biggest aha thing for me was that using this embedded file to
Yeah.
deploy it and
Yeah.
do edits. I mean, you go into address book and you say edit, you've got a local copy. You're editing something right in memory. And then you say save. Basically, it's taking the data and writing it, right? And it's the same concept, right? This local data, the only thing is that I haven't shown is like, you know, all the details of the JSON that's involved to package it up and send it and transact it. But the concept is not hard to grasp in that it's a local cache of data, and that when I send it, I just send it and it transacts.
Well,
But
I'm actually doing a project right now where I'm doing something similar, but in a very different way. And that is, I'm editing a whole lot of data in a crosstab grid. And what I've done is I've gathered all that data on the server, packaged it up into a JSON object, and then use a virtual list to display that locally. So all of my data is local, right? So it's all global variables and unstored calculations local. And I'm editing that data locally with scripts, simply just changing the JSON object. And then when I'm done and I'm ready to commit, right, I send the JSON package back to the server, and then it unpacks it on the server. But what I did not do, which is what you have done, I did not care anything about record locks. I'm like, yeah, if two people do the same thing simultaneously, the data is going to be foobarred, right? You know, last in is going to win, kind of thing. So I'm very intrigued by the extra layer that you have done, in case I want to go back, because in my solution, I've got 3 people that are using the solution, and only one of them is in charge of editing this data. So it's not an issue for me.
I mean, it boils down to every situation is unique, and you might not need to do that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very relevant to me. It's going to take me a while to digest it and grok it for sure. But thank you. I really it's opened my eyes. Very, very cool.
Cool. Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, I have a question. It's a great presentation. I have some clients who are hosted on the other side of the country, and I've had some issues with unstored calculations and performance with that distance. And I made a note that you mentioned using a transactional model to store data. How do you actually achieve that with every transaction? Do you perform the calculation of those, what used to be? Okay, I got a sense that was
it's a multi-part presentation, and it's a lot of details to unpack, and probably not enough time to do it justice here. But definitely, you know, one thing you can do, one thing I strongly urge you to do, and that is, you know, like that list view I had, easy to build, like you know, a list and unstored calcs, and you know, just measure it with the release debug feature, and then export the data, and then just use the fact that you have stored data. Look at the list and bring up the list in the same way, and it's going to be just stored data. So if you can transact the data and get the data stored, this is what you would deliver to the user, and then do the same thing. Measure it with the release debug and see what difference you have. And the results are dramatic. You'll be astounded, and you're going to say it's well worth the effort to go down this path, especially if you have users that are struggling with performance.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, I was almost at the point where people would just connect with Microsoft Remote Desktop, because it was just certain actions were just unusable if they were accessing it from around the world, or it was just I mean,
There's other blog posts I've done about imports on server. Never do imports locally, especially over a WAN. Transfer the file to the server, run the import on server. There's all kinds of things you can do with that. And there's a lot of things to consider with PSOS as well. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. So definitely a follow up on this topic and more to come. Tony, I think I'm done. I think I'll hand it over to you.
And the crowd goes wild. Thank you very much for a New York style presentation. A lot of content squeezed down into like a New York minute, and that's actually pretty terrific.
And Beaker is my favorite. He's my favorite.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I've got something. I'm going to reclaim the host. And then I'm going to present something. Let's see, share my screen, share. Okay, so hi everybody, Tony White. I've been doing FileMaker for quite some time. And can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So just a little technical story here. I'm using OmniGraffle because it kind of gives me the ability to show a bunch of scripts and script folders and all the different pieces of the FileMaker interface all in one place, and they're all connected. So let's see, let me get my mouse posse up here. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. The stuff I'm going to show you is kind of bread and butter, basic stuff that I think you could make a strong case that this should be in pretty much every system. And I do have, I'm going to start with simple, build to complex. And I think I've got two really nice routines that I haven't seen out in the wild. So I'm very happy to be showing them because I know that there's at least one person out there in the FileMaker community who has not used these techniques, at least one, maybe more. So you'll see that. I am going to start off with some basic stuff. So I did prepare for this presentation, 20 years and counting to prepare. And then more recently, I made a little ridiculously simple script, which I have called Demo Script That Fails Early. It is, as you might imagine, a demo script that demonstrates a concept that I think is pretty well known. It's the idea you got a FileMaker script that you want to run. And whatever the script, it might change the state. It might pop another window. It might go to a different layout. It might make records. And before you run that entire script and discover, midway that there's an error after you've got Windows open and all kinds of craziness, you want to fail early. You want to sort of check that the conditions are auspicious, like that big word, that you've got good conditions to run. And so starting with simple in this demo, you might have a button on a layout and it says, are you in the browse mode? And that's very, very basic. And you could supplement it with some hide object when, FileMaker 13 and up, so that the button is not showing unless you're in the browse mode. But this goes way back as a technique, and it's still good, even in the more modern versions. It is a one-line perform script that calls a script that's 5 lines. So it's 1 line instead of 5, helps keep your scripts tight. And it's very simple. Plus, if you give it a name, we do have a naming convention. Underscore means that I am a script that is potentially called as a subscript. Val is short for validate. The browse mode operates on a scope of window, and it's an English sentence here. That's the only language I know how to program in. So it's val window browse mode or halt, and that's pretty much what it does. Doesn't need a comment. It is self-commenting. So that's simple, very simple. Here's another one, val window found count. You click on a button, it's supposed to operate on a found count. If it's found count is 0, that's kind of silly. Once again, you could hide that with a hide object when, but you want to put that in the script as well. You can, solve that problem from 2 places. By the way, all of these, I consider these to be control type scripts. I didn't come up with the word control that comes straight out of the FileMaker user interface. We actually have windows. No, those aren't windows. We have script folders named after what FileMaker does. They say control, we say control. They say navigation, we say navigation. We have obviously other folders that do everything, but we like to use folders named after them for some of these bread and butter scripts. And these strike me as things that pertain to control. So those are two simple things. There's 5 that are very commonly used. One is commit record or halt. What does that do? So I click a button and I get an error like, something's not right. I'm like, wait, there's nothing wrong with my script. It could be that I'm looking at a window, I'm sitting on a record, and it hasn't been committed. And if I do commit it, I'm going to get a message that says something like, oh, you forgot to, use some sort of field validation, like you've got to enter the first name and the last name. And I want to sort of draw a line between an error that's because I didn't, start from a clean start with a committed record. So that's, and the script itself. So a lot of scripts I'm going to start by committing. Some scripts are going to loop across records. So I put this one. Oh, we have a locking feature. I'm not going to demo this because I want to get to the other things that are, I think, more interesting. So I'm not going to demo that, but that's, we have a little checkbox. We lock records. And then we're like, oh, don't, it's locked. That's a little bit custom. These are sort of, platform. Everybody has these at their fingertips. And then open record for editing is kind of interesting. It kind of touches on, it's sort of, transactional to some extent. You might, in some cases, you might want to open the record and grab control of it. You would, on a single record, it actually makes more sense. In a loop, it doesn't completely make sense, but I just threw it in there. All right, and then here's a little fun FileMaker fact. You can see more of them on Twitter. I wonder if Chrome's going to open. Okay, and then here's a window. So we did this one, this one, this one, this one, this. We got them out of the way. And here are the two things is really kind of the focus of the presentation. Simple to complex. These are more complex. And I think I'll do this one first. So object name. All right, validate object name is on a layout or halt. So that's the omnigraphical page for that. But I've got this other infographic that's sort of relevant about object names. And I'm putting this up there because it's kind of like, why do I care? Well, the reason you should care, I think the reason that we already do care is a lot of the scripts that we use make use of object names. Object names are awesome. And they're very useful. This infographics is basically like trying to showcase the object name feature in the FileMaker platform. And what are we going to showcase? We're going to showcase that you give a portal an object name, very, very useful. A lot of times you're going to go into a portal and you want to make sure you go into the correct one. So I could go by field. Well, you might have identical portals, one's filtered one way, one's filtered another way. So object names are unique. They're disambiguate code. You might have a button. You click on a button and you want the picker to show up right next to the button. Object name will get you there. Layout fields, you might want to enter a specific field. You might have an invoice ID field twice on a layout if that's the way you're doing invoice IDs. Yeah, well, a lot of possible uses for object names. Now, this is actually, I'm going to skip this because this is, I believe, an earlier rendition of this particular routine. But I'm going to show you, I think, what's a plausible one, plausibly better. So I actually have two. I kind of like the one on the lower right-hand corner. And it
get rid of the bubble.
Can I? Oh, yes, I can. So here we have, we're going to call it. This is how it's called. So what I'm doing here, and a little bit of coding style here, I'm declaring, instantiating the object name variable. And I tend to like to declare things prior to using them such that they're easy to see when I'm running the debugger. I could do it all at once. This could be one line instead of two, but I like to instantiate in a visible space. All right, and then I'm passing it as a parameter, and I'm calling a script, and this is the script I'm calling. Now, it's very short, and this is being recorded. And what does it do? The object name is going to be a value. And as a matter of fact, I'll just bring this up for a second. This is sort of a concept. I showed this at the Michigan group. And I'm just putting it up on the screen. It's being recorded so people can look at this. It's a work in progress. It's all about values and lists because, you know, we have JSON, which is awesome. Before we had JSON, we had lists, and the FileMaker platform has a ton of functions that are all about lists. And I call them lists of values. Value list is one type, but list of values. And so what we're doing here is we have an object name. We're expecting later on in the script to make use of it to go to the correct portal, for example. And so we want to make sure that that portal that we want to enter, that object name is still there. You know, maybe a junior developer was mucking about, and, you know, maybe a senior developer, you know, did something. If it broke, I want to know at the beginning of the script, and I want to halt. I want to fail early. So we get the object name, and then we use a design function, which is the layout object names. And I've got some comments here. And one of them is outlines a little bit of gotcha that's in the documents, but it's, you know, it's a gotcha that the layout object name function, you can call it as we called it on line 3. But that could break in a kind of an edge case is if you have a file, if the first file that you open had the same name as the file that you're in, it'll point to that. So just don't do that. So you'll notice that when we call this, we call it, instead of passing in a file name, we just give it open quote, close quote. And according to the documents, and in my experience, the documentation that FileMaker provides, if you specify no file name, it returns the results for the current file, which is perfect because that's what we want 100% of the time. So that's the gotcha documented here. And then, all right, so we've got two things. We've got the object name, which is a value. We've got the layout object names, which is a list of values. And then I got on line 10, I'm defining a variable, which is kind of code that's written to be a comment. I don't want to do a comment. I want to do code that reads like a comment. And I also want to make it look like Ruby code or dot syntax. So set variable object name dot is not on layout. And then there's a little complexity here, not much, tiny bit of complexity. We're using the filtered values, a very appropriate function to deal with values because it has the word values in it. And this works. And then my if is just a value in a variable that's a pre-calculated and visible in the script debugger data viewer. And, you know, if the object name is missing, most of the time you're not going to see this. But if something goes wrong, you're going to see it. Object name is not on the layout, has been renamed. And actually, that looks kind of wrong. Oh, no, it does. It tells you the name of the object it was looking for. Anyway, this looks right. And that works. So that is one example of failing early. And over here on the upper right, just an example of a field with an object name and an example. We use a little bit of namespacing for object names. F stands for field, F dot. So that's F dot is the namespace. And then we do for a field, which happens to be subject, we use a kind of a reverse, instead of, this is in the activity template file, and that would display the fully qualified field path. Saying that was the hardest part of the presentation. I like to flip it around. Instead of being TO : name, I like to do name -- TO. Anyway, that's the convention that we use. And that's just a demonstration. It's not a portal, but it's just another possible reason why you would want to know why you'd want to use an object name. We use it in a sort script that I think I mentioned it in one of those contest things, which everyone should go watch. We had a lot of fun, as Vince was saying earlier. 2 presentations, collaboration between the Portland group and Dig FM, a 2-day extravaganza comparing different ways of approaching a FileMaker problem. So I'm going to pause for questions. Does anyone have any questions on this fail early script? Validate the object name. Any questions on that?
And just wondering about a halt instead of exit. Why you chose to halt instead of exit.
That's a good point. I actually thought about it, and I was like, I kind of felt a little guilty for using halt because it's kind of like the sledgehammer. and then I thought, well, I really want to fail. And it almost, in terms of the places that I use it, it's pretty much the same thing. As far as I can tell, it's at the top of a script, and the net result, halt, exit, is kind of the same.
Well, aren't you calling these as subscripts? And
I'm calling them as
if you're calling it as, sorry, if you call it as a subscript and you exit, it'll continue back to it won't halt.
Hold on, let me think about that.
No, if you call halt, it'll just halt.
Kills the entire stack of
Kills.
scripts.
Yeah.
Right, but if you're in one script, I think unless I fell asleep for a second, which is possible, if you're calling this val object name on layout from another script to test whether the object is there, when you go to the subscript, if you don't halt, it's coming back to the main script. And
Yeah. I think we're all saying the same thing.
Oh, we are.
Okay, so
Sorry.
it's I guess I got lucky on my first guess then. A couple, no, I never went back.
I
But
am still awake.
No, the problem
just
is
wanna
if
be
you have
careful.
more than one subscript.
there are
problem is if
to
you-
Vince's point, there are definitely times to use the exit where, and actually there's a beautiful technique where when you have a parent script and a subroutine, and you want to and you have 20 records where you're going to succeed 19 times, then the halt would be a disaster because it would just kill everything. Yeah. So I did. Oh, and
You'd want to do it. You'd want to call this stuff, like you said, fail early. You'd want to call this, if you're going to halt, you'd want to call this before you've opened like a modal card window, for example.
Yeah. All of this is the premise. And actually, one of the things that I meant to say earlier was there's a lot of things that I'm not going to talk about because there's the single pass loop, which is an interesting topic. I'm not talking about it. There's a lot of error trapping and discussions and approaches about different ways to do error trapping once the script is started. Once there's Dan, to your point, once there's a card window open. I ain't going there. I'm just looking, all of these scripts are really designed to do the simplest possible thing to fail even before state changes, I guess. So the halt, because they're just bang, halt, don't go anywhere, nothing happened.
You gave the developer a very good warning. The script name says or halt. So whoever's calling this will hopefully have considered the downside of using these subscripts and uses them with appropriate warning, right?
Yeah. And one of my rules of thumb is what if someone said, I think somewhere about one of these things, what if the user does something wrong? It's the developer who's calling these things. And I will say that I'm demoing these. I do have an alternate flavor on these things that do identical to what I'm going to show you next, with the exception that instead of a halt, they do a cancel proceed. So what I was doing is essentially, and I think that was a good conversation. We can circle back on that. I'm going to put the other stuff on the table and you guys can pick what you want to talk about. I've got a refactor example. So true story. So I'm preparing for this presentation a couple days ago, 4 days ago, if you're keeping track. And I bumped across some code that I had in my system that I'd done a while ago. And I said, wait, this is a perfect refactor example. And I'm going to refactor it and I'll have a nice little screenshot. Plus I'll have some code that's on its way to being cleaner. So if you see here, line 15, 16, well, lines 15 through 20, I commented out. I'm doing what I like a lot. Another thing I like is a very, very lightweight comment. And it says 7 lines. So it's 5 lines were commented out and 2 lines were new. So that's just that's my comment. 7 lines changed. The 7 lines immediately underneath this comment were changed. And if you want to know what happened, look at the 7 lines immediately underneath that. I don't like to type. And the change that was made is I don't even want to look at it because it was if this is not empty. Okay, so I've got 4. There's a whole stack of these that you could do, but the 4 ones that I find the most useful are if a field is empty, then halt the script because there's nothing good happens. Or conversely, if a field is not empty, greater than 0, equal to 0. There's more, you know, if the found count is above a certain threshold, that would be another good one. But I just wanted to put these 4 in the table as these are like the most commonly occurring things here. So I had this one, and it's like, you know, how it's like 5 lines to say if the field is empty versus 1 line. Although in this particular, it's 5 lines to say if what is this? Greater than, field is greater than home. Like if this equal to 0, greater than 0. It's like, do I have related records? Do I not have related records? Sometimes that's good news. Sometimes it's bad news. I'll leave the logic, you know. The point here is that I'm calling that. So here's actually what I want to focus on, because I could go on tangents. What I want to focus on is, look how easy that reads. So we're using get field name, and this is a field reference. If I rename this field, the dialog will change because it's a field reference, and it's a great function, get field name. And I think of it as having a sibling, which is get field, which we still see in a moment on the next screen. So first I had this function. I wrote this script rather, and it was great. And then it was better than what I had before. I'd say it was version 2. I don't even want to show you version. I guess version 1 is what's above it. Who knows what version 1 is. But this is version 2. And then version 3 gave you the ability to either send 1 line in or send more than 1 line to do an optional dialog override. So by default, if I'm in a big hurry, I'm going to use line 21, and it's going to give me a default message, which is field count, which I'm not typing that in, I'm just getting the field name. And I'm saying field count cannot be greater than 0. It's a bit of a no frills message, not super friendly, not going to pass everyone's UI UX tests. So then line 22 is the new and improved, and there's more there. So I pulled it out with a separate screenshot, which is separate screenshot. Oh, so it's 3 lines, as you can see. And by the way, I'm using Pilcrow without the quotes because I'm trying to be very economic on my keystrokes. And it says there is 1 or more related purchase order items you cannot delete. And I'm actually breaking the line there. And that's my custom message there. So I've got a routine. It's backward. This is version 3. I'm going to show you it in a second. It's backward compatible with what I had for version 2, which was the no frills. And I was pretty happy with it for a while. And I said, you know what, I can do better. So we did that. And now this script is probably the most complicated one of everything here, but not too complicated. How bad could it be? It's only 29 lines long, and a lot of that's white space. I do like white space. So on this, I don't think we necessarily need to see them, but there's, just for fun, this is OmniGraffle. I'm going to skip it. I don't think I opened Chrome ahead of time. But anyway, they're nicely documented, and I think of them as things that work together because we already use get field name in the way that we called this script. By the way, naming convention, underscore means I'm called as a subscript. Underscore P means I'm called with a parameter. And that's pretty much it. And then field, I like to do the square brackets to kind of indicate that it's like a reference or something, or that it's code. It doesn't have exactly precise meaning, but anyway, underscore, we use that. P for parameter, underscore BTN for button, FAP, full access privilege, ST is script trigger, on and on. Anyway, so here's the code, and I'll walk through it once. It's being recorded. People can look at it. People can take a screenshot. So what are we doing here? We're taking the script parameter. I like to kind of declare a variable. I always call it param. You know, I could call it P, but I like a little bit of shape to the variable name. And then that's that. And then I'm picking it apart using the value. I'm taking the first part out. This is actually pretty complicated. No one should expect to be able to kind of like, oh, I get everything. It took us a while to make this. I think it's pretty tight. So, but if the parameter is empty, or if I fed it a silliness for the first line, then let's fail. You know, I got a subroutine to fail early that in itself has the effort to fail early. And it says something went horribly wrong. I'm going to halt. We do have a help system. We pipe things out. It makes a record in a table. It sends a Slack request. So we, you know, if something goes wrong, we find out about it super fast. You know, it's okay to make a mistake. Just fix it fast. Try not to make a mistake, but it happens. So then we have field content, which is, the content of the field. So get field name, get field, they play nice together. And then if the field content is greater than 0, then we're going to do a message. And there's some fancy code here that people can pick apart later. But basically it boils down to saying, if we've got a second line, if we've got more than one line, that means we have a custom message. And if we have only one line, we have the default message. So that's the default message, backward compatible. And, a lot of times we might just bang it out with the default message just to get some code up and running. No shame in that, fast deploy. But if there is a custom message, whether it's 2 lines, 3 lines, I don't think you want to go more than 3 or 4 lines with the custom dialog, because you might get clipped. And then it's a custom message. And so that's when I like it. If I go back to the thing, it's actually my refactor example. It can take a long script and it can make it a lot shorter. So that's my 2 examples of fail early. And I'm going to stop there for questions, if there are any. Comments, questions? Is this something that everybody's already, well, I already know that not everybody's using this. I do find it useful, to take long scripts and make them shorter.
Kind of curious about your naming convention.
Sure.
Where you have like kind of like almost like an if statement kind of filled out in the name of the script, which is interesting.
Yeah, so it reads if field is greater than 0, then halt.
Yeah, it took me for a little bit of a second to think, is that the parameter or is that the name of the script? So,
yeah, if you were looking at this in code, one of the things I like about it, and this is also similar to the sort field by name thing that we were talking about in the contest that we were all playing with on the West Coast last week, I think it was, is you can even see what the parameter is pretty easy. So if you look at this line, it's if field is greater than 0, then halt. And then this, it's coding style, different ways of doing it. And if someone, wants these 2 routines, I don't have them packaged up in a file, but I will. Just send me an email. I'll drop my name if you care. If not, it's okay too. You can build them from the screens. Get some exercise. But if you want me to send you, you can, and you can, change the names, do what you want. Any other questions, comments before we move on into a general conversation? At some point, I'm going to stop the recording and then we can, talk off the record about anything. Okay, so I want this to be recorded. We will have another meeting. I think we might do one in June. It sort of depends on who's got blurbs. And it'd probably be, I think we're going to do at least a few virtual. Someone said, when are we going to meet in the physical space? Soon, I don't think next month. And I think doing the virtual gives us an opportunity to have a mix of New Yorkers. Thank you, John Marina, and out-of-towners. Vince, thank you, dropping by. So we'll do a bunch of those. And I guess my closing pitch would be visit lots of meetings all over the country. It's fun. So last call for questions before I hit stop the recording. Okay, I'm gonna find the button to stop. I'm gonna stop the screen share. And I'm going to stop the recording.